Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 83. I'm going to put a slight apology in here. My voice sounds a wee bit rustic than normal. That is because I've been in a concert over the week with Lower Nifsdale Young Farmers. We had a great time doing 999 What's Your Emergency? And I couldn't tell you enough how much to get involved if you want to meet new people in your area and learn more about food in that place. It's been great fun, but that's not why we're here. We're here because we have, as I always say, an interesting guest. But I think on the R2Kast, this guest will be the person who has had the biggest following that I'm aware of to date. Anyway, we have Charles Dowding. Charles, would you like to say hello?
Hello. Yeah, nice to meet you, Wallace. And pleasure to be here.
Just before we get started with another episode of the R2Kast, I would like to thank our primary sponsors, A-Plan Rural. A-Plan Rural are heavily involved on the social media scene in the ag space with 120,000 followers on Instagram. They use this following to host social media takeovers with farmers throughout the country to showcase their stories. They also post to their rural community blog with further stories about these people in the industry. On top of this, they like to support initiatives that are championing the British agricultural industry, such as myself. So thank you to A-Plan Rural for that.
It's a pleasure to have you on and very much looking forward to it, as I do most podcasts. But over the last maybe about 10, I've really sort of jumped out of the comfort zone. Before, it was always sort of looking at the agricultural side of food production, and it was always people in food and farming. But when I jumped into the away from agriculture, it wasn't as often. I've been starting to do it a lot more, and I'm learning a lot. But for those of you listening, when I'm speaking to someone like Charles, I might look a wee bit silly here and there, so I apologise in advance for that. If you're enjoying the R2Kast, be sure to check out Rural to Kitchen on Facebook and Instagram, and also check out the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get them. Not last week, on Monday, we would have had the Dumfries and Galloway Food Partnership. We're looking at sort of bringing people from all walks of food production together and learn about different methods. So kind of what I do at R2K. And then next week we'll have someone from Zimbabwe, Blythe Aitken, who I actually went to uni with, but didn't know somehow, which is quite strange. But she's based in Zimbabwe and is an agronomist focusing mainly on blueberries. So that'll be another interesting topic there. But today we're here to talk to Charles. Charles, could you tell us a bit about your background? Was food production something you were around as a kid? Was it horticulture? Was it agriculture, if it was?
Yeah, it was dairy farming mainly, but also mixed farming. My father had a nearly 1,000-acre dairy farm 6 miles up the road from here, in fact, which my elder brother then took on. And my father was quite old when I was born. He was 55, actually. He'd met my mother, who'd been in the Land Army during the war, World War II. And at the time she was 18, he was 34, and he'd proposed to her then, I think. And she declined, said she's too young. Anyway, they finally got together in 1955, about 4 years before I was born. And so I had that background very strongly in me of growing up on a farm. But my father was pretty determined that I wouldn't be a farmer. He wanted my elder brother to do it. And so I actually went to Cambridge University, and I was supposed to be someone who was going to have a glittering career, somewhere else.
Okay.
But something kept pulling me back to the land. And partly that was getting interested in nutrition through becoming a vegetarian. I read a book about animal rights, and I instantly became vegetarian. That was in 1979, when not many people were. So my father said, "Why are you eating like a rabbit?" And yeah, it was, I kind of marked myself out already as someone a bit different, and that's always how I've been. And because then I got interested in organic, and so I was organic market gardener from 1982, when not many people were doing it. And so that again was something a bit challenging. But I was also no dig from the beginning, but not really talking about it, because in the 80s, there wasn't that much interest in soil. It's nothing like it is now. It's great now. I'm really loving the interest in like soil biology. But when I started out, the books were saying things like, and this was scientists writing, they were saying the mycorrhizal network does not relate to vegetable growing. So vegetable roots do not use mycorrhizal networks. That was stated as a scientific fact. Okay. And I wanted them to. I was discouraged. but you know, that's the kind of background I was in there, and yeah, it went from there. I started off with an 1.5 acre market garden, all handwork, no tractors, and I've always found myself felt more gardener horticulture than farmer, which I don't think there should be the division there is, but there is a division, you can't deny it. And because I span both, because my family are farming agriculture, if you like, and I'm more market gardening now more, because I getting smaller scales I get older, and I'm also talking to a much bigger audience. You noted my following is huge, and a lot of them are gardeners, because I want to enable thousands, millions of people at that level, rather than hundreds, say, of bigger operations.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned that it should be more a collective. You know, it's sort of agriculture, horticulture, and it's food production. You know, that's what it should come under.
Yeah, exactly.
The different forms of that, and it's quite interesting sort of working at a college that's based on food production in rural sectors and stuff like that, and you see that divide notably. Like my master's was food security, so I'm interested in the food side.
Right. Very relevant now, yeah.
Oh, well, very. I mean, I think it's one of those terms we hear all the time, and everyone's like, "What does this mean? Is this padlocking your fridge? Like, what's this?" You know, but not really knowing what it actually means. But yeah, so that was always what I was really interested in. Obviously, I'm more focused on the agriculture side, but there's such a divide, and it's wonderful.
Last week I was at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, and happening at the same time was the Oxford Farming Conference. You know, that's like chalk and cheese, and we'd go out like at lunchtime to get a bit of food, and you could see the guys from the Oxford Farming Conference. They all dressed differently as well, you know, tweed jackets and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's amazing. I could see they were more the big landowners, and the Real Farming Conference was more the small scale. Although there was a bit of both actually. Those are two worlds that I wish would meet more. You know, unity is strength.
Yeah, the issue is it never made sense to me that they were on at the exact same time. I always felt like that created a rivalry. It's like pointless in the chase, you know, the same time, same thing, not the same thing.
No, Wallace, I think it's because when they, oh God, what's her name? It was the professor and his wife. She's called West. Anyway, they started it as fringe movement, if you like, you know, and it was a bit of a statement. And it was very small, 14 years ago. And it's grown so big that I think you're right now. It's got to the point where they should not be at the same time, because then people could go to it. At least. Yeah,
and there's interest from both. I mean, the amount of folk, I've never been to either. I was supposed to go last year, and I went online because of COVID and whatever. But the amount of folks head down to both is good. But if it was separate, then maybe see more working together. So quite a lot to unpick there, Charles. With a few things to cover. You came from dairy farming, and it was quite clear that your brother was going to take that on. Was there ever a stage when you were like, I want to take this on, or was the dairy side just never really clicking with yourself?
Yeah, no, never. I don't really relate to cows very well. Although I actually had a spell. I kind of threw it all in 1991 and moved to France for a while and had a small farm out there, and I did keep a few cows, not very well. I'm much more comfortable with crops, and I like small scale work. That's my thing. I don't really like using machinery. And so, yeah, I'm intensive market gardening.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And you said you went to you're going to Cambridge, and that was going to be the plan then. What was it you looked at where you studied there?
I studied geography. I've never studied agriculture or farming or anything related to soil or cropping. And actually, I'm grateful for that because it gave me a freer mind, I feel. And, you know, I'm kind of person who questions things, and I still am. And when I started growing, for example, I'd noticed that most organic market gardeners, the main thing they were growing was weeds. And I didn't want to be in that situation. I could see how stressed they were and how difficult it was making life. So I was looking at ways to have fewer weeds, and that led me to mulching. I first of all bought some old hay, much to my father's disgust. And then I was mulching with straw, which he gave me actually. You know, so I was trying a lot of things. And then with no dig, I discovered that you get many fewer weeds anyway. So it's been a process of discovery as well as cropping.
We'll get to no dig at a point. It's probably the main reason I want to talk to you. It's what you think when you hear your name, or when you hear no dig, you think of your name. You know, there's that sort of. It's just the way it is. The first time I'd ever heard of you was when I joined. There's a group on Arran I mentioned I was from called Arran Eco Savvy, they're sort of looking at, they've got some pioneer projects, they've got small gaps where farmers have given this sort of community group some ground,
Right.
and they're trialing different methods, and no dig's certainly one of them. And I was like, no dig, what's that? And I'm very much aware of no till. Is it the same thing? And
Right.
sort of into that. So that was where I first heard of you. So shout out to Jessica Wallace for that. But that'd be a good few years ago now. But you mentioned you became vegetarian. Was it 1979? Yeah, that would be. You mentioned it wasn't normal. It was quite rare at the time. What did that come with challenges at the time? Obviously, you mentioned your dad saying, but in general, did it come with challenges?
Yeah, it marked me out as someone not quite in the main mix.
Okay.
It kind of puts you on the edge. Doing anything unusual, you've got to have a bit of character to sort of not, it's much easier to just be like everyone else, isn't it? In life. It helped me to sort of just get used to that idea a bit, and then being organic. Like I said, in the 80s, not many people were. I remember in the 80s being really grateful to Prince Charles, actually, because he was one of the first people of the establishment, shall we say, who kind of stuck his neck out a bit and said, organic makes sense, actually. And all the universities and places were saying, no, we need more food production. I understood why they were saying that. World War II was still fresh in people's minds, including my father. He hated it because he reckoned I was just losing yield and not using fertilizer, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's all quite different.
And mentioning losing yield there, how does organic production compare to non-organic?
Well, I would say actually potentially you get more food. The problem is now with pricing that, and the Sustainable Farm Trust has done a lot of work on this with Patrick Holden, for example, that food is not correctly priced. So in what I call chemically produced food, there's hidden costs that are not being accounted for. And the pollution caused by, say, fertilizers, leaching, pesticides, leaching into the water and all that kind of thing, which has to be cleaned up at some point. Someone's got to pay for that. That's not accounted in the food cost. So it looks cheap. Chemical food, I call it. It looks cheap, but organic food actually in real terms, real time, is cheaper. It's not a niche market at all. And it's been marginalized wrongly by this false accounting method, and also by the language. It's another really, if you think about it, it makes no sense. For me, it makes no sense to call people who use synthetic chemicals conventional farmers, but that's the language which is accepted. And words are powerful. And conventional, if you look it up in the dictionary, means normal and natural. And I don't think it's normal and natural to spray Roundup on fields or use pyralid weed killers, for example, or even artificial fertilizers, dare I say it. Because, even Rothamsted now are saying that artificial fertilizer nitrogen is damaging micro soil life.
Well, I've said this exact thing at work, in fairness. So it's always quite good to have that chat with students and really consider all sides, especially ag students. And I was an ag student and I was against everything as we are when we start, and then you sort of open your eyes to everything. And I was going to say, I didn't know if you were going to mention what conventional means. It's not natural. It is, however, now normal, which is wrong. Yeah.
I've said it to Patrick as well when he was director of Soil Association in the late 80s, early 90s. He shouldn't be using that word for the other camp, so to speak. And he said, well, yeah, but if we call them chemical farmers, they're not going to like it, and then they won't talk to us anymore. He wants to keep the dialogue open. I could see that, but I've been in this game long enough now. I'm 64 nearly, that I can see things have not really changed in my lifetime, despite everybody's great ideas. And if we don't change soon, there's going to be so much pollution. Look at the insect calamity at the moment, the disappearance of insects. It's much more shocking, I think, than is even being realized. And that, that's going to be hard to reverse. So soon we need to take a closer look at what we're doing and call things out as they are. And I'm not saying anybody's wrong here, because that doesn't get you into a useful dialogue for sure. But I think we need to be more clear about what is happening.
I think that's true. Yeah, I'd agree with that. For the listeners, we've got listeners that are 15, 16. We've got listeners that are over 65, and it's quite interesting watching what they're interested in watching. What is organic? Now, organic is a defined system, but what you've chosen organic, you've chosen to go down that route most part of 40 years now. What's the difference between that and, just for the sake of this discussion, conventional farming?
Well, yeah, it's in a way you've got to define the word first, and the definition for me has been too loose until recently. It became, when I was starting out, the definition of organic for most people meant no synthetic chemicals, which actually is a very negative way of looking at it, because it's just piling on the no, a bit like no dig, but there's a bit more to it.
Yeah.
So it's much more, for me, organic is about embracing like life of the soil. When the Soil Association was founded in 1946, they talked a lot about the mycorrhizae and fungi in the soil and all that kind of thing. People like Albert had the biome. That was in the language in the 40s. Then it got forgotten in the late 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s. And it's only recently come back. So organic is very much about favoring soil life, I would say. And from that springs everything else that is good for the planet.
It's the basis for what everything is. It's what everything begins. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so encouraged now. I hear that a lot. People are realizing, and so we're in a good place there at least.
It's always quite funny because I mean I've done this podcast with loads of people now, and I know there's sometimes my colleagues will listen, and I'm not the soil person, right? I'm not. I understand that point, but it's not this thing I focused on. And it's always quite interesting when we talk about, well, we went into soil science there. They're like, well, stop pretending you know what you're talking about. Right, okay, I really have to stop this because I learn a lot from people like yourself and other folks we've had on before. We've mentioned no dig as we go, and as I said, it was the reason I sort of wanted to get in touch. And it sounds very simple. It sounds very simple, and maybe it is very simple, but I'm going to guess that that's not, and especially the fact you started out doing no dig, but maybe not realizing it was a thing. Can you tell us what no dig is, Charles, from the ground up, everything it involves, and why it's something that's pretty much defined your life now?
Yeah, okay. It is simple. You're absolutely right. It's about leaving the soil alone as much as possible. So then, like, I'll say that in a video on YouTube and I'll get some question. It's always fascinating comments. I'll say, oh, this is all very well. How do you plant a tree? It's like, oh, you dig a hole, actually. No dig is not a religion. It's not like you must not dig, that kind of thing. But it's just, being practical about it, disturbing the soil as little as possible in the recognition that soil has so much to give us, soil life in particular. So that's the other aspect, is looking after soil life. And that's where the surface mulching with organic matter comes from, or comes in. So for vegetable growing, I find it's best to use compost. I've tried a lot of undecomposed mulches like hay, straw, and so on. They tend to encourage slugs, and that's what we don't want for vegetables. So what I do is I put on every year around 1 inch, and I'm measuring that after it's settled a bit. It's always hard using these measurements, because how do you measure the depth of compost? You put it on and it's all loose and fluffy. It measures more than when it's been rained on for a week. So that's my measurement after the rain. So about 1 inch and 2.5 centimeters. And then on pathways, my beds are about 4 foot, 1.2 meters. On pathways of 16 centimeter, 40 inches. Is that right? No, 16 inches, 40 centimeters. I'm putting on about the same depth of well-rotted wood chip, with the aim that the soil is always covered. This is what we hear a lot now with regen farming. The soil is always covered. In a farming no-till situation, more likely to be with cover crops and that kind of thing. But in the garden situation, that doesn't always work. That's one of the differences between gardening and farming. The actual practicalities of how you run it month by month. But the underlying principle is very much the same, looking after the soil with either a living or a decomposing mulch, and planting through and into the soil through that.
And what, for those of us, including myself, that really don't know about the gardening side, my mum will be listening to this. She'll absolutely love this podcast. She'll be like, Wallace, stop embarrassing yourself. I'm going to ask you. Right. We know what mulches are, but what are mulches actually offering? What are they offering the soil?
Well, I mean, a mulch is anything on the surface. And it's a good question, because if we're not careful, we get into using language and that can exclude people who don't know what you're talking about. So a mulch is anything on top, and it could be plastic. Black plastic is a mulch. It just happens to be a non-organic synthetic mulch. And I use it very occasionally if I've got a big weed problem, like masses of bindweed or something like that. You put the plastic on for half a year or even a year, and that doesn't get rid of it, but it weakens it so much that you're in a situation where you can control it the following year using a trowel to lever out the regrowth of bindweed. And I can get rid of bindweed in 2 years. I've done that several times. With digging, I think that's very difficult, because this is a big feature of no dig. When you don't disturb the soil doesn't have the same need to grow weeds. How does one explain that? You can go down many roads. I like to see a soil as a living organism, and a living organisms like us, when we're disturbed, we need to recover. How does soil recover? Well, the wording is very apt. It's literally soil recovers and by growing weeds. And around here, farmers say chickweed follows the rotavator. Well, blow me down. I mean, I've seen that. It's certainly true. I've done all this in my youth. And I think it's because rotavator really damages the soil, it chops it up into little pieces. That is so unnatural and horrible. And when I started organic growing, most organic growers were using rotavators a lot because they didn't have other means of weed control at the time. But you rotivate, then you get all these weeds, and chickweed binds the soil together. So that, I'm sure anybody who's tried to pull chickweeds out much, the roots are really wiry and tough, and they're rebinding the soil basically, so they're healing it. So with no dig, I find you don't get that. Soil doesn't need to do it. So just going back to that plastic mulch, that's one use for it on difficult perennial weeds. We always dig out woody roots before starting, so it would be brambles and any ivy we pull out, that kind of thing. Everything else you can cover, including the tricky perennial weeds like even mare's tail. That's where the plastic might come in. But mostly, I'm finding that perennial weeds like here, when I arrived at home 10 years ago, a lot of creeping buttercup, dandelion, couch grass in places, and just using cardboard initially with some compost on top, 10, 15 centimeters, 4 to 6 inches, huge dose, but only as a one-off. They're very good weed control and straight in with a level of high fertility that makes the market garden productive right from the beginning. It pays itself back in economic terms actually very quickly, and then you've got long-term fertility from that, and going forward you're using a much lower dose, which I think works out as 30 tons an acre maybe. I'm saying this in public now, it's very dangerous because the police will be knocking on the door in the morning, so I'm breaking the law. I think this is a big grey area that needs addressing. How come compost is put in the same legal framework as slurry, which does leach nitrates into the water? Compost, this is the whole point of compost, and it's the whole point of organic growing. You're adding organic matter where the nutrients are insoluble, they're not washed out by rain. And I can prove that every year because I put my compost on in December. Often we're putting it on November, December. One full-time guy helps me now. And when the compost goes on, it's washed through a lot, as it has been this winter. We've had like 10 inches of rain in the last 6 weeks. And so if the nutrients were soluble in water, they wouldn't be there anymore. But every year I get fantastic crops. And not only that, I get fantastic second crops. And you look at the garden in September, October, and all the brassicas we planted in summer, like calabrese and purple sprouting, after beetroot and carrots and lettuce and spinach, with no extra compost applied in the summer, all of those second crops are looking really lush and brilliant. So, it's living soil, it's holding on to its nutrients, and nutrients are not synthetic and chemical. That's a big difference. They're not slurry either. So I hope someone heard that who can change that crazy law.
I would just like to quickly interrupt the show for a minute to give you some extra information on our primary sponsors, A-Plan Rural. A-Plan offer bespoke cover for farms and estates the UK over, and will give you tailored insurance for anything on the farm, from your old workhorse tractor that's been around 20 years or a fancy new and exciting diversification.
Yeah, that's quite interesting amount of folk listening to this. There's people in the NFU that are listening, there's people in the HDB that listen, so might be the right person. Yeah. It's quite a strange, quite a diverse listening group to the podcast, but they are normally food-based. So
yeah, well, for me, just to finish on that, I think there was a misunderstanding when it was framed first legally, by the people who make these laws, how much do they actually know, really? And even how much does anybody know until recently or really understand about composting and how it works? Although it's been around a long time, obviously millennia, forever. I think it's only recently, and particularly looking at the biology, that we've come to understand more about how it works and how soil life works as well.
I think, policy, law, all that sort of thing is quite often outlined by people that aren't experts. It is. Yeah. That's maybe unfair to say in a lot of cases, but in some cases it is the case, definitely. You mentioned also wood chip there, Charles. What role does wood chip play?
Well, I didn't used to use it actually, but when I started in the 80s, nobody had wood chip. It's quite a new thing. Everyone chipping the wood because they're moving away from bonfires and that kind of thing. It's brilliant. I actually got involved in giving a bit of advice to in Waddesdon, to a farm by Rothschilds. It was actually the kitchen garden where they were doing a lot of digging, and they've got no dig since then. And on the farm, I subsequently learned they had a huge amount of woodland, and rather than burning the wood to tidy it up or keep it tidy, they now compost it and putting it back on the soil. So that Woody compost, woody waste are brilliant for making compost in more long-term fungal manner, which is what soil, massively cultivated soil is lacking the most. Here I'm not lacking it, but it's a way of maintaining or adding to fertility in pathways that we're walking on. It gives a nice medium to walk on, and the fungal decomposition happening is bringing fertility to the ground. And in horticultural terms, I'm a bit unusual, or gardening terms probably more. I don't have wooden sides, for example, to the beds. So if there's any gardeners listening to this, and you've got wooden sides, I'd urge you to look at taking them out. Because for one thing, it's a waste of space. Wood doesn't grow plants.
Yeah.
And you probably find slugs on the inside, so it reduces pests. But more than anything, it opens up the roots in your beds to explore more easily and access the soil in the paths. The path soil, just because we walk on it, is not compacted. There are big misunderstandings in the gardening world about that. They keep being told their soil is compacted and they have to dig it. It's like, no, a firm state is good. That's how soil should be, and plants can root into it and be strong, well anchored. And so I want to keep my path soil fertile as much as my bed soil. So that's wood chip.
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that. So is that not because you're going to be using the path for growth, but so that there's sort of a healthy soil throughout the whole area? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and it's part of the root network. So like we see last summer in the dry weather, it was really clearly visible that if the beds are running along away from your line of sight, and the plants on the edge of the bed on each side were noticeably bigger than the ones in the middle. And I'm sure it's because they were just feeding into the path soil, particularly after showers of rain in July and August when it was really dry. We do water, but I can never really get on enough to make up the deficit. But you can see the edge ones feeding into the path, they were bigger.
Right, there we are. Yeah, I was going to say learn something every day. I've already learned like 48 things, but that's the biggest one for sure. It's interesting. You mentioned that soil's a living organism, breaking it up that disrupts everything. It causes a problem in that sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to hugely embarrass myself here, and I thought the reason for no dig was now it's obviously going to be part of this sort of reducing that release of carbon, but there's also the side of the soil health side as well.
Well, they go together though, because carbon, you're absolutely right, but carbon is the building block of soil life. Everything good in soil pretty much is carbon-based organic matter, all of that. So it's all interlinked, and it's, in a way, it's which bit you focus on is what you can emphasize. But the whole thing is, it's keeping the whole system all nice and working almost like a computer. Every little bit is important. The more you can leave alone or encourage, the better it hums along.
And now you mentioned that organic isn't strictly no synthetic addition of chemical, that sort of thing, but you're obviously minimizing that. Do you use any biological controls or anything along those lines?
Yeah, at the moment, I use Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a soil bacteria. It was discovered in Germany in 1911, I believe. And it's unique for how if caterpillars eat a leaf it's been sprayed on, it disrupts their digestion process and they basically die because they can't digest food anymore. But it only affects caterpillars. So of whatever butterfly or moth it might be, and we only spray it on brassica leaves. I'm not spraying it randomly everywhere, and we only do it from mid-July to mid-October roughly, when the white butterflies are flying and moths to reduce caterpillar damage. So yeah, I'm using a little bit of that. I don't use anything else actually. I just don't find the need.
Is caterpillars and slugs your main two problems then?
Yeah, insect-wise, that's pretty much it. And it's only on brassicas, and summer brassicas at that. So, the winter brassicas at the moment, like the broccoli and the kale, they're not affected, obviously, by caterpillars. Slugs is potentially big. I talk about slugs a lot. We don't actually suffer much slug damage. But that's because, I've learned to set up the garden so there's minimum habitat. No wooden sides to beds, no straw or hay mulches, just compost and a bit of well-rotted wood chip. And there's basically nowhere there for them to hide. Plus, with no dig, you're allowing under the natural predator balance. So no dig soils, I reckon, have higher proportions of beetles, which eat sluggers, common brown beetle and carol beetles. We often find toads when we're picking lettuce leaves. There's loads of them here, and they eat slug eggs, I believe, in slugs. So, you just automatically, without consciously doing it, because nature does it for you. But that's where no dig, again, it ticks so many boxes without you even realizing. It's kind of beautiful because it's no dig, so by definition, it's doing less. And I think some people find that difficult. It's like, well, it's lazy then, you know. But no, it's being clever, and you've got to be clever, because I mean, all of us were under incredible time pressure. You know, market gardening does not make any money, basically. You know, you pay your wage if you're lucky. So you just got to keep finding ways to save time and be more efficient.
So it's a sad comment that market garden doesn't make money. Are you at the scale that you do, or is it your other enterprises that allow you to do so, Charles?
Yeah, no, I'm at the scale I don't. I mean, I'm cropping 1/3 of an acre.
Right.
But there's two other things to what I'm doing. One is I'm doing a lot of social media and trials work actually as well, and that takes time. So I'm not a pure market garden. If what I'm doing here on 1/3 of an acre was purely to produce crops and to make money from that, I reckon I could make a living. But that's not what I'm trying to do. But what I noticed, you know, I talked to a lot of people doing a similar thing. You know, it's really hard. You know, if you inherit a property, that makes it a lot easier. But if you've got rent and a mortgage to pay and that kind of thing, wow. Oh boy. I mean, I'm paying a guy a wage. You know, I pay him very full wage actually, 40-hour week, and I'm very happy to do that. And I can do that because I've subsidized my work through income from my writing. I've written 14 books actually now on YouTube.
I've got that written down. I've got to ask you.
Right. I do that by night. Not really.
I mean, yeah, that's a commitment in itself. So what I didn't realize you did trials. What trials are?
Oh, well, that's so interesting. That's one of my favorite bits actually about what I'm doing here. So I've got 2 beds side by side. One, I still personally myself dig it every December, and to about the depth of a spade, 25 centimeters, 8-10 inches,
Okay.
and incorporate the compost at the bottom of each trench. And the bed next to it, which is the same width and size as 1.5 by 5 meters each bed, is simply no dig with the compost, same amount of compost on top. So the 2 beds have the same amount of compost. That's really key. You know, you're putting in the same amount of stuff, but one is dug, the other is no dig, and then we crop exactly the same plants, plant at the same time, seeds, everything, and harvest at the same time, and record all the harvest. And I've been doing that here since December 2012. So 10 years of results now. Really interesting. I've got last year, for example, we had from the dig bed, we had the impressive figure of 91 kilos of food, and that's only 1.5 by 5 meters, 5 feet wide, 16 feet long. So that's 91 kilos. The no dig bed gave 113. Right. And that's pretty consistent difference over 10 years of adding up these figures. You can see them on my website if you click under advice, and there's a drop down, and trials is in there. Yeah, the no dig is about 10% ahead.
Right. Wow. That's actually probably a bit more than 10%, isn't it? Well, certainly that figure, but maybe over the course.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing. The 2 biggest differences we've had were 2018 and 2022, both very dry years. Right. I think that's when disturbed soil struggles more because of the mycorrhizal network having been broken. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm trying to work out, because I don't know who's looking into this really. I hope I'm wrong, but there hasn't been much work along these lines. And so if you break the mycorrhizal network, that disrupts plants' ability to find moisture. So that's again where no-till farmers are doing better in dry years, I would say. I'd be happy to hear anyone else comment on that.
No, absolutely. And if you are listening, guys, feel free to drop me a message. I can pass it on to Charles, because don't drop me a message expecting me to have an answer, because that would just be silly in general.
Well, they can comment. I put a lot of posts on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, so you can find me there as well. And I do actually look at pretty much all the comments myself somehow. And
no, I was impressed by that, because I mean I don't know if you remember this, but I contacted you maybe about 2 years ago, right at the start of this podcast, and you didn't have quite have time, which was fine. That's not an issue in the slightest. But I maybe commented on like 4 things and emailed you, and all of them you replied to. So yeah, I was quite impressed by that.
I make the effort because I feel it's worthwhile. Communication with all of us is, I think we get further by talking. In fact, at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, a guy, Ollie Rodko, who made a preliminary little talk introducing, he said, we're all gonna, in the farming world, we need to stick together more, we need to unite more, because there's so many bodies of great people doing different things, and they all have different names. You either belong to one or the other. And if we could somehow find a way of unifying a bit more, would be powerful, actually. We need the power to, because there's big power forces out there which are not healthy for farming and life. I think most of us would recognize that. And so, we need to be organized.
No, I'd agree with you, and I think we've just hit 8 billion. It's going to hit 9.3 at least in my lifetime, 9.5 from what I always learned. Yeah, and we've got to come up with more effective ways of producing food in an efficient manner. That
and distribute it better, and distribute. The whole thing of social equality, I think, is a big one, because that's also not helping things. So that's where I think politicians struggle, because they don't. It's not in their mandate really to stir up a revolution, shall we say? I'm not saying that necessarily, but the whole picture needs looking at, and not just about increasing food production.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, globally, the biggest issue is infrastructure, especially in all developing. I hate the word developing. I don't like that.
A friend just sent me a link to a fantastic compost making initiative in India, Shivash, I think it's called. Okay. And it's the guy who made the 5-hour energy drink. He's suddenly realized he's sitting on a fortune, and he thought, how can I help the world with my money? Nice thought, a good man. And he set up a compost making initiatives. He noticed that a lot of farmers were struggling to buy the inputs they needed, like fertilizers. He's helped them to get organized on, instead of burning their waste, to actually make compost. And with the input of a bit of money like that, and help education, it sounds like that's having a big result across a lot of Asia and subtropical climates. So these are good news stories that are happening. We don't hear about them now.
And that was Shivash, did you say?
Shivash, I'm pretty sure. Shivarsh. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, well, I'll check that out. There's some great things going out the world over. I mean, slightly different to that, but I filmed with a guy, I think it was R2Kast 71, Regis Umujuraneza, who's the food and farming policy chair for Rwanda. I don't know how I managed to get in touch with him. Very cool. But he's got a company called the Carl Group, and they've basically, in Rwanda, sweet potato is readily available, but it's looked down on as sort of beneath people, and they've found this way to create this affordable sweet potato biscuit that is basically affordable to the masses for breakfast, and getting that nutrition into everyone. And these initiatives, there's so many out there that we never hear of, and it's so cool to hear them. So I
mean, there's another brilliant one in Malawi called Tieni, and they're helping farmers. They've got a big problem of panning, soil being panned out there from too much cultivation of the wrong kind, and they do the one big dig to break up the pan, and then they make these deep beds and don't disturb the soil anymore. So that's how I know about it. It's kind of no dig, and it's been really successful. It does use fertilizer though, because they haven't yet worked out how to get enough organic matter back. So there's lots to learn still, but it's really, I love it when I hear about successful initiatives like that.
Is there any place in your form of no dig for inorganic fertilizers? For organic fertilizers.
Well, what does that mean?
Well, okay, fair, good question. Let's, for the sake of the discussion, talk on animal waste, so slurries, manures, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. You class them as this word, fertilizer. It's a difficult word, because it rather like composting and like manure. All these words, you've got to define them probably before talking about them. I would class fertilizer in my world. I see it as something, as a plant food you give to specific plants that you estimate need feeding more.
Okay.
And for me, that way of thinking is not in my lexicon. And that's a subtle difference to saying that organic fertilizers, if you like, are bad. I just don't think like that. And what I'm looking at, and encourage other people to look at, is the soil. So everything starts with the soil. Get that right, both the health and obviously nutritional quality. But then you've got, people like Dr. Elaine Ingham of the Soil Food Web in the USA, who, she's a microbiologist, soil scientist that started small, but she's becoming well known now, because I was at a conference with her, and she said this amazing statement. She said, no soil in the world does not have enough nutrients. In other words, every soil has enough nutrients already. What it's lacking is the biology for plants to access them. That's a statement that revolutionizes how you think. Because then you're not thinking, I need to get all the fertilizers and nutrients. I need to work out how to get my soil more alive. Now, I'm not saying I agree with her 100%. There's probably a few percent of soils where that's not the case. But it's just that way of thinking. So looking at getting the biology right.
It's funnily enough, I do actually know who Elaine Ingham is, and I honestly think she said one of the funniest statements I've ever seen. Joby, I don't know what age Elaine is, but she's older than myself. Let's just say that, right? And she was very much matter of fact when I watched her on a Soil Food Web webinar last year. And she said, oh, let me get this right. We need to know the truth that soil is the future of regenerative food production. Very much like if a duck quacks, it's a duck. I don't know. I thought that was brilliant, but in the accent, if it quacks,
now that's
it's
profound. Hang on, what the hell was she meaning?
I don't know if it was just a matter of fact statement, like if a duck quacks, it's a duck. If something's regenerative, you've got to look at soil health. Was how I picked it up.
It's kind of like saying that it's an obvious truth.
Yeah, that's exactly what she was saying. That's exactly what she's saying.
Yeah. And but she's nearly 70 actually. You know, I have met her, and she's a very down to earth, straightforward woman, basically. But she's on a mission. There's no doubt about it. And actually being really effective. She's got a good team now around her, and her message of what you're saying. Let's hope there's more cracking.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it. I mean, that stuck with me. And funnily enough, Elaine Ingham's been in my head, and so if I was going to mention it at some point, it's quite nice you mentioned it. Maybe the only the only person I could have actually name dropped, but you stole it from me. But I'll take that. So you've written. Well, actually, before we got into books, one more question before that, Charles. You obviously got trials on your allotment, but how many crops are you growing? There's trials.
Well, I'm growing about 30, probably about 30 different kinds of vegetables. I'm concentrating though for selling on salad, any plant that will make salad leaves. So I grow quite a few lettuce, endive, chicory, mustard, salad rocket, mizuna, claytonia, winter purslane, chervil, landcress, some slightly more wacky ones.
Yeah.
And aiming to have a range of salad leaves for sale all year round. And actually, even now it's mid-January while we're talking, we've sold quite a bit actually in the last couple of weeks. And that's from plants which withstood the frosts. We had -9 centigrade here last December. We managed to get fleece covers over the plants in the polytunnels and greenhouse and keep them in good health, not only alive, but actually in good health, because it's where they've got to be. And then when it warmed up before Christmas and since, you know, we've had decent production. So that for me is a big part of what I'm doing commercially. The other thing I'm doing, I'll just mention one more trial I'm doing actually, which is a trial, and that's looking at growing potatoes, broad beans, cabbage, and leeks in the same ground every year, so without rotating, basically.
Right.
Mini rotation. I do potatoes and leeks in the same year, but every year that piece of ground grows second early potatoes, harvested mid-July, followed by leeks. And the neighbouring bed every year grows broad beans, sowed November, harvested June, transplanted then with cabbage. And that's 8 years now. We've just finished doing that. Oh no, 9. Sorry, 9 years. And the crops this year have been as good, with one exception. And potatoes, particularly outstanding, actually. It was the best year ever for potatoes.
Right.
I've started saving my own seed. So I'm just challenging things, you know, and questioning. And what I think is with no dig that you're getting a healthier soil, and you know, the rule, if you like, of that you have to rotate is less important. I'm not saying rotation is a bad thing. There's nearly always a place for rotation, and it depends what you're growing, where you are, how you're cropping your soil. But it's not as axiomatic as it's made out to be.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I mean, like, the thing that jumps out is cabbage was one of the 4, wasn't it? Yeah, cabbage, broad bean, potato, and what was the 4th? Sorry,
Leeks.
You know, brassica, a major one, a rotation-based disease. Well, if you don't rotate, clubroot becomes a major issue. Is the one that jumps out.
Yeah, but why? Why does it jump out?
Well, that's exactly what my question was going to be. Yeah.
Everybody does that. Clubroot. Well, haven't you got any clubroot? Why should I have clubroot? Who said that it's going to happen?
What I guess my question would be, why don't you? Because it's quite a commonly accepted thing that's going to happen. No, I'm genuinely interested. That's not me saying, you know, that's genuine.
Okay. Now look, this is really interesting, because how you phrase the question is an indication of how we're thinking. And okay, I'm going to take this a bit laterally now, but it helps to explain where I'm coming from. At least is how do we understand disease? You know, do you know there's 2 theories of disease? What, you know, define disease. Tell me what it is. And Louis Pasteur won the argument back in the 1900s, and his theory, the germ theory, is the one that currently holds sway. And that is centered around us and all organisms as defined entities which need protection, that we're sterile or pure, defined by our level of what we are, and we need protection from viruses, bacteria, everything, and that is called germs. And so that's, you know, most people subscribe to that, I would say. You know, they're worried about bacteria, they want to be clean, they'll use bacterial cleaners and so on and so forth, and then they worry about viruses. I better not go there. That's all.
Well, I'm gonna maybe shock you and say I'm one of the ones that don't, and
I'm saying
what was quite scary the fact.
But the rival to Pasteur in the late 1800s was Antoine Béchamp. They're both French as it happens, and his understanding was that all organisms are biomes, or he had words like microzyme, but basically collection of microbes. We are a collection of microbes. Us as organisms are held together and defined and maintained through our intelligence, brain, central nervous system, however you describe it, and that can adjust our biome. Or if we take in enough healthy microbes, we can maintain a healthy balance of microbes. We are a collection of microbes. So it's not thinking of us as something that needs protecting from microbes. We actually need them. And that's where, the old sayings, I'm sure you and many of your listeners will have heard, we should all eat, it's a peck of soil, my mother used to say to me, in our lifetime. It's for the microbes, as long as the soil is healthy. And that builds health. And that leads you then to seeing health as a positive state, more than just an absence of disease, which is how it's come to be seen. You got the National Health Service should really be called the National Absence of Disease Service, because that's what it's got to. That's why they're struggling to keep going. But if it could be more positive, strong, positive health, and Yves Barfer, who founded the Soil Association, said, health is as infectious as disease. Wow, what a powerful statement. And if we start thinking, any of us along those lines, it is empowering. That's literally, and that's where we need to be, because it gives you the power, it gives me, it gives you the power over your own health, much more than Pasteur's outlook of defending yourself against, the potential problem that you can't see.
I like that a lot, actually. I really like that. I mean, like, I've someone who doesn't like going to the doctors, doesn't like taking pills here and there, because I feel like that's what we're accepted as how we should do it. So health is a state. It shouldn't be the absence of disease. Is that right?
And we can maintain it. It links to agriculture. This comes back to what you're about. Your whole mission in life, and getting healthy food into people, and that's farming. That's what we want to be doing. That's what I want to be doing. And I'm delighted if I see people, for example, I wash my salad leaves before selling them in a butt of rainwater. As far as I'm aware, that's legal. Basically, and then as long as you put on the label rinse before use, that classifies it as a food that is not with health and hygiene, people. Mm-hmm. It's just a vegetable, basically. So like selling a carrot or beetroot, but it's bagged, and people, I think, from what I've seen, quite often tip it out on the plate and eat it like it is. There's microbes in there, good ones. And a lot of my shops and restaurants who I supply, they say, God, your leaves have got amazing storage life. And I think it's because they're alive, they are living. Yeah. And that's another nice way of looking at it, but there was a nutritionist about 80 years ago, and he said, eat only foods that rot and decay, but eat them before they do.
Okay, yes.
That's a good maxim. In other words, don't eat processed food. If you've got food in your cupboard, like a Kit Kat, could be a year old and still looks and tastes the same. That's maybe not a good one.
And out of interest, I mean, this is quite a deep question here. Do you purely live by that, or do you still eat processed foods here and there, or
I eat very little processed food. I actually avoid them because I'm very well aware that's really unhealthy. And I'd like to think that's how I've maintained a good state of health. I'm actually type 1 diabetic. And I've had that since 1990. I got it when I was about 30. So I have to inject insulin. I'm not free of the pharmaceutical industry. I acknowledge them for that. Thank you very much. Without insulin, I'd be a goner.
For sure.
A lot of ways of healing it. So far, I don't think anyone's done it. I'm not giving up hope. But that aside, I'm feeling in very good health for my age, and a lot of other people said to me similar things. And again, if you think of health, our whole body, our brain is part of our body. So when you eat really healthy food, microbe-rich food, you're enriching your brain, and that links to the gut. It's wonderful, all this information coming out now about the gut. The gut is 1/4 of the brain. The gut biome is the same as the soil biome. They work in almost exactly the same microbes if you've got healthy soil. So that comes back again to eating a bit of soil. Don't worry about washing carrots and leave a bit of soil, and that kind of thing. It's all really beautiful knowledge, because it's kind of common sense, and it frees you up and it empowers you and makes you more healthy, and then gets the brain working, because the brain's part of the body. And once your brain gets going more, you can have great conversations like this, start questioning things.
Well, I sometimes wonder when I speak to people like yourself, Charles, if it is a conversation or if it's me just guiding someone that knows much more. And I'm like, yes, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
But at least I'm learning.
Yeah.
So you mentioned books, Charles, and for those of you watching on YouTube, which is very much not a massive market of mine at all, it's much more the non-video views. You will see when Charles goes side to side, there is a YouTube silver plaque there, which is for those people that have 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. So there's been a lot of things you've been involved in media-wise, whether that's books, TV, social media. Over social media, you'll have over 1 million followers over the 3 you mentioned. I'm sure pretty bloody near if you're not. When did all that start? How did that start?
I think it was Twitter I was on first, and that would have been about 2009.
Right.
Yeah, I just saw it as a way. The lady I was with at the time, Stephanie Hafty, she was pretty keen on getting into that as well. She pointed me towards Facebook, and I saw that, yeah, there's an opening. So, I just went for it. And one of the reasons was that I was struggling to get my message. I felt I had a really valid message. No dig, I've been doing it already for 30 years, and it was giving fantastic results with big savings of time. What not to like? Why wasn't the world embracing it more? And I really feel that even more strongly now with my dig no dig trial beds side by side, and you're getting 10% more food every year for the same amount of compost. No dig actually needs less compost, contrary to what you often might hear. And I'm not using any fertilizer or anything. And I think it's, in established media, mainstream media, there's a lot of vested interest. Actually, I'm saying quite a lot of controversial things this evening. Hope this won't get me in trouble. But there's a sort of status quo that doesn't want too much new knowledge coming out, because it disempowers people who've got strong positions already, holding the reins, however you see it, balance of power, and editors. And so social media is brilliant because you can just go straight out to people and talk to them and show great results, and you don't have to get permission of an editor for an article or a magazine program, whatever it might be. I mean, YouTube, likewise, obviously I'm totally free in what videos I put up there. And I love it because I can be creative without anybody sort of interfering with that.
And it's I haven't told you this, Charles, but I've got a very deep interest in social media, to the point I've already drafted up a proposal for a PhD based on food production and social media, sort of the impact of social media influencers on food production in the UK.
That sounds a really interesting topic. I think it's enormous, actually.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, and what I love about it is you're so international by default. So I get these amazing comments from people in India, the Philippines, Chile, Utah, Canada, all over the world, Zealand, and really positive. And the one thing that's shining through is how the no-dig principles that I explained at the beginning, leaving soil alone and feeding the soil life, that applies worldwide. It's the details that vary more, and people are having fun, because I'm encouraging people to be creative. That's how you learn. And great feedback.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think this year a podcast was watched or listened to in 49 countries, I mean, the views aren't through the roof. But I've had about 100. I think I had 125,000 yesterday non-video views, and about 250,000 video. But I've sort of went away from YouTube. I promoted it for a while and paid a promoter, but more focused on the non-video ones. But well, it is. There's a guy in Singapore that absolutely loves every episode. I don't think he's missed one. No, I don't think he's missed one. And I think that's brilliant. It's so interesting. And I said, over the last maybe 10 or 15, I've started taking people in like yourself, and I'm sure you'll have heard of Alstromedia Ben Cross, the Alstromedia grower in Brighton. Maybe you have. Bringing him on, I mean, something that I have no idea about, and with that, I'm trying to get someone who's based in every country on the planet is the goal, which basically gives me a long-term goal. It means I'm not stopping the podcast next week. That's so that's the long-term thing. But you've got this sort of following, and I like the idea that it's the way I see it as well. You don't have to check with someone what you post's okay. You're not an idiot. I'm not an idiot. You're not going to put something out there that's going to cause you a problem, or it might cause you a bit of a problem. because you're being that sort of that barrier breaker, if you will. But there's a way you can sort of look after yourself. And yeah, I've always been quite a fan of your pages, mainly the Instagram, Facebook, just because what I use. But yeah, so if you somehow don't follow Charles and you follow me, be sure to check out the Facebook, Instagrams, and YouTube, because they are good. There's one question I have, Charles. I finish every podcast with two questions, but there's one question that's been on my mind the whole time, and I keep forgetting to ask you. When you're mentioning compost, are you talking store-bought compost or your own? Are you making your own compost? Or I assume you don't have enough to make your own, but that could be wrong. I might have,
Yeah. I hope you've kicked your feet up and got comfy and enjoying another fantastic episode of the R2Kast with another really interesting guest. I would just like to quickly take another second to plug the sponsors of the show today, the Scottish Farmer, and I would strongly advise you to go out and pick one up this week and see even more of the fantastic people that are in our industry.
How long have we got? I make as much compost as I can, and what I make is enough for about 2/3 roughly of what I use. But having said that, some of what I make the compost with is material I bring in, such as wood chip. So we'll preferably in small pieces, we'll leave it for 8 months or so to mature, and then we'll run the lawnmower over it, actually, to chop it up even more. Sometimes it turns almost into a brown powder, and I'm using that as a brown material in summer when we've got a lot of grass clippings, for example. So yeah, I'm bringing in stuff, and I can make quite a lot, and I'm doing some worm composting, but at the moment I'm mainly doing what some people call hot composting, but I don't make it very hot. I don't want to go above 60 centigrade too much. I've got 70 sometimes. Depends how much green matter you put in, because I want a decent fungal bacterial balance. And again, I don't want to be too careful about this, but if you compost hot all the time, it is more bacterial. It's still good compost, but it's just different. I think you get more health from one with a bit more fungi. And so that's also where the worm compost comes in a bit, and the wood chips on the pathways. And yeah, well, I think that's it. I buy in a bit of compost. I buy in a bit of mushroom compost, a bit of green waste compost. And actually, I'm also pleased to be doing that, because it gives me the insight into what other people are using. So I get so many questions about, why does this compost not behave as I expected? Mostly because it's often sold too fresh, actually. Green waste compost is classic one. It's good in the end, but when you take delivery of it, it's probably hot and hydrophobic, so it's not going to hold water. That's just because it's too fresh. They sell it too fresh, but they can't afford to hang on to it for ages before they that kind of thing. So if you've got a bit of space to store compost in your area, then it's good to buy it before you need it. And then one last one I'll mention is animal manure, which is basically compost once it's decomposed. They're all compost in the end. Anything, leaf mold would be another one. Tree waste, until recently anyway, tree waste are one of the purest and least worrying in terms of chemical residue, but animal manure has become problematic. Not so much for things like antibiotics, which I reckon do break down, and soil compost life can do that, but it's this bloody weed killer, paralid, which is trade name in the UK, I think, is things like Forefront, and it's also got into cloparalid, aminoparalid's got into lawn killer, lawn weed killer. If anyone listening's got a lawn, don't use any weed killer. Don't use feed and weed. It might have this horrible poisoning, and you could get it killing your potatoes next year, because these clippings don't break down. The active ingredient doesn't break down in a heap. It breaks down, actually, from what we're finding out, when the compost or manure that's got it in is spread on the surface and sunlight can degrade it. That's the best. And also soil microbes break it down. So don't rotate it in, because that kills the microbes. Just leave it on top and they'll do the work for us. So that's the one caveat. It's such a pity, because otherwise animal manure is great.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of why I asked the question earlier. That makes sense now. It makes much more sense. And there's one more thing I actually forgot to ask as well that I had considered throughout. You mentioned the insect calamity earlier on, was I think the term you said. Tell us what you mean by that. I've got a feeling I know what you're talking about. Let's hear. I
wish I knew more. I'd urge any listener interested to check out the work of Professor David Goulson at Sussex University, and he's written books about it. He'd be a good person for you to interview, I reckon. He's a great guy, and I wanted to listen to his talk at the Oxford conference, and unfortunately I was involved in a talk myself at the same time, so I couldn't get across there, but I think it's online. I need to have a look. I was doing a talk, actually, as part of a panel with Vandana Shiva and Poppy Okocha, and we were talking about how to get online learning out to people and make it more accessible, free online learning. We'd all contributed videos for free to this new platform called Earthed, with a D on the end, and that, or Earth Initiative Earth. There's a lot of really good things like this going out. But yeah, just going back to the insect calamity, I mean, I don't know how bad it is, but I think it's worrying me. I'm not the kind of person who worries too much, because otherwise you just spend your life worrying and not doing. But on the other hand, if we get to a point of not many insects, that's not good.
Just what you're saying about sort of sharing knowledge there and trying to get that out. Have you heard of Skill Seeder? I don't know if that's one that's came up yourself.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that phrase. What is it?
Skill Seeder.
Uh-huh.
It's basically an app. Free is probably not the case, but it's not expensive. Let's say you want to learn about, let's just use No Dig for example. If you can prove to the app that you're well knowledged in it, well versed in it, you can sort of put seminars on and so on, and people can access that. And I think you, as the expert, let's say, whatever the word is, I don't really like the word expert, but I think if we're talking about No Dig, there's not really many folk better than yourself. You can choose a fee, but I think a lot of people just share the sort of content they have. But
well, thank you for that. I'll have a look.
I've not used Skill Seeder before, but I have been asked to sort of put PowerPoints on and stuff like that. And just because of my contract, it's not something I can do. You know, it's a thing that's out there. No, listen, Charles, it's been a great chat. I genuinely, when I bring folk on like yourself, I've mentioned it. I'm like, gee, I hope I do this sort of do it justice. But I think you've done yourself justice. Some fantastic information in there. I know for a fact my mum will still be listening in, because she is an avid gardener. Loves gardening, and as here is a very good gardener. So I hate that I'm saying that, but I'm sure she'll have taken some tips away as well. And there will be other folk listening doing the exact same. But there's two questions I finish every podcast with. The first one's, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the second one is, if you had any tips for folk getting into, and let's do market gardening or No Dig, what would they be?
Okay, so in 5 years, I don't know. I'm an organic grower, so I'll go with the flow and see what mixtures come up. But I would like to have an even bigger audience. Actually, I feel that I can help a lot of people, and I think there's huge challenges ahead. And I reckon the information I can give is very appropriate for the times we're coming into. So yeah, I'm hoping that I'll be really up there and we're very well known. And then, what was your second question? I didn't quite understand it.
If you had tips for folk coming into, so normally it's, if you had tips for folk coming into farming, what would they be? But if you had tips for folk coming into or getting involved in No Dig, what would they be? So advice for getting into what you're doing, I guess.
Okay, gosh, that's quite challenging actually, because especially in the UK, I think finding land, that's not easy, is it? So I'll assume that you've got a bit of land. Oh, crikey. Two things. Well, have a second string to your bow. What I was saying about I'm talking about small scale horticulture here. It's very difficult to be profitable enough that you're going to make enough money that you'll still be doing it in 10 years. I know a lot of people who manage for a few years, but in the end, it's a bit of a grind down, because if you're not clearing much profit, where's your future? Yeah. And so if you do it maybe in a smaller way, but have another income on the side, that's the sort of way I'd recommend anyone looking at it at the moment. Sorry, it's not positive.
No, it's always the big challenge. I mean, whether it's large scale farming, small, large scale agriculture, small scale horticulture, the biggest challenge is getting that ground, and it's about as hard as it's ever been at the minute, and that's not even owning, that's renting as well.
Yeah, I think community farming of some kind could be the way, so getting more people involved and sharing skills, that's what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
And I worked with an amazing woman actually called Kate Forrester, who's worked here for a couple of years. She was a chef in London and got disillusioned with that, and realized now that actually the core is healthy food, where it all comes from. And she's got into it, but she's very good. She's renting 4 acres near Ringwood, and she's excellent at getting more people involved in helping her. and it's giving people who wanted to do a bit of outside work, old ladies even, dare I say, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, they'll come and push the bar for an hour or two, that sort of thing. And that's making them happy, and it's helping her. So yeah, if you can find that community.
No, but and there's a lot of brilliant community sort of gardens out there, and I think sometimes there's maybe the opinion that not everyone's in them and they're sort of just there for a short period, but there's some brilliant ones out there where folk are committed.
Absolutely, and I'll just mention that I write a weekly newsletter. It's paid. You pay £5 a month. It's very good value to get a newsletter every week of advice what to do this week in your garden or market garden. And for community gardens, we do it free. So if there's any of you listening, you can see on my website how to apply.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Well, there's two I'll be aware of. The Arran Pioneer Project and the KPT Community Trust will be the two that I assume will be I've been involved in the past.
Right.
But no, brilliant, really good.
And Wallace, I've just brought out a book for children. I must just mention that.
Is that aimed at me? Is that why you're saying that?
Yeah, it's coming out this week, 19th January, official date. No Dig Children's Gardening Book, and that's my wish. That'd be one of the things. The 5-year question. Get more kids in, because that's the future, and they really get No Dig. It makes a lot of sense. They haven't got anything to unlearn, and it does make sense. So yeah, when I'm teaching, it's one of my favorite phrases I hear is, "Oh yeah, this makes sense." I know that if someone says that, they've got it.
And working with or teaching kids is one of the most rewarding things on the planet. Like you say, like they've got no prejudice, they've got no whatever, and it's quite, they might go and hear something tomorrow and think, oh, that makes more sense, but it's brilliant to see that sort of thing.
And really challenging it can be, can't it? Because they'll give you the eye. And I was actually took a little class of 14-year-olds back in October on the Isle of Wight, and that was one of my more difficult teaching missions. They were really uninterested most of the time, but the teachers, when they went back to the class, it was quite a positive message.
Yeah,
I think 14-year-olds, bless you if you're listening, but they're very good at appearing uninterested, even if they are.
Trust me, as a lecturer, I'm well aware, and I'm teaching. I'm teaching into high school. He does it through work as well. So no, I know what you're talking about. You've got to sort of go out of the box sometimes to make it fun. No, listen, Charles, it's an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you coming on. Hope you've enjoyed it yourself.
Very much. Thank you.
Hopefully, my questions haven't been too useless.
Oh, really good. Good for my
I'm glad. For those of you listening, guys, we talked about teaching kids there. If you want to check out R2Kast 70, R2Kast 74, and R2Kast 76, which has actually went out about 10 minutes ago at the point of recording. That's with Countryside Learning Scotland, Luke Ablett, and Ray Ayrshire and Aaron. The first and the third are two charities aimed at sort of getting rural education into schools and sort of vice versa, schools out to rural sector. Ray very much based in farming, Countryside Learning Scotland very much based in every rural sector, whether that's estate management, whether that's farming, whether that's horticulture. They're sort of involved. And then Luke Ablett is a farmer himself that looks at doing the same thing just himself. So those are some 3 examples there. We'll see you next week for Blythe Aitken, who's based in Zimbabwe, but has ties to Scotland and is, as I said earlier, a blueberry agronomist. So again, a nice chat for me to not understand the thing. And then I think the podcast after that is going to be Impossible Brew, which is a beer making company that is non-alcoholic. But still, this is what I don't get. I haven't filmed this yet. You still get the benefits of beer from it. That's what the website says. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that means. I'm looking forward to what the benefits are. But we'll see you then. Hope you enjoyed another episode, and we'll see you for R2Kast 84.
I hope you've enjoyed another excellent episode of the R2Kast. I just want to take this moment to quickly thank our primary sponsors once more, A-Plan Rural. If you follow A-Plan on social media, you'll see the work they're doing to really promote British farming and back our industry. It's been a pleasure working alongside A-Plan Rural so far, and long may it continue. The values of A-Plan Rural runs perfectly in line with the whole mantra of Rural to Kitchen, and I'm glad to have them on board. Check them out on Instagram at A-Plan Rural and on Facebook at A-Plan Rural Insurance. See you for the next podcast.